Welcome to the Irish NFL Show's Week 3 Talking Points show in association with our partner QuinnBet. Well, the beatings will continue until morale improves. That appeared to be the theme for Sunday's games as far as the heavily favoured teams were concerned, at least. The Cowboys, the 49ers and the Texans all took hard losses on Sunday. The Broncos and the Panthers gave their fans pleasant surprises, and the Chiefs did what the Chiefs continue to do, squeezing out a victory with the minimum to spare after yet another officiating controversy, which we'll get to a little bit later. The Chiefs are one of the last remaining undefeated teams at this stage, but let's start by talking about one of the other 3-0 teams after the weekend's games, because Shane, the Vikings are for real. Back-to-back wins against two serious contenders now. Brian Flores absolutely given CJ Stroud fits. You know, we saw CJ Stroud putting the arm around Caleb Williams last weekend and giving him advice. CJ Stroud never looked so much like a rookie as he did last night, and the Texans were grounded.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. Defense is the order today for Minnesota. And it got so bad at one point that Stephon Diggs had to get all of the Houston offense at the sideline and try to get them to calm down and group up because the stadium was so loud and they couldn't figure out what they were doing. It's like they were boys amongst men almost. Brian Flores really put CJ Stroud in the meat grinder from start to finish. Being able to get 5 sacks on CJ Stroud, we saw how good that offensive line can be against maybe some not quite as potent defenses. But then you look at the other side of the ball, the fact that they were able to get 14 points in the first quarter. Sam Darnold, doesn't need to put up so many yards and still got 4 touchdown passes. The run game was good. The passing game was good. There is nothing to not like about the way Minnesota is playing this year. And really, it kind of makes sense because if we were to rewind of how we were talking about this Vikings team as being a rookie to step into, it turns out it's a great place for any quarterback who needs some sort of redemption to step into as well. And that is the case with Sam Darnold. I mean, fair play to the entire organization there for completely reviving, all hopes that they can really go on top of this division.
Kieran, we talk about it, and it's the great cliche, and I'm sure I even mentioned it last week on the show, and we've probably mentioned it several times before about how coaching really does matter, and it is the ultimate of the intangibles. And you're seeing this again over the weekend. We saw the Rams pull off what looked like an unlikely win. We saw the Vikings under Kevin O'Connell pull off what looked like an unlikely win. We see the Packers keep on trucking no matter who they have at quarterback, and we see the Pittsburgh Steelers go to 3-0 as well, and we'll get to them in a little bit. These teams, it's not just about hitting it lucky in the draft. It's about how you develop your talent, and it's about having a way of playing. It's about having coaches who know what they're doing. Like we talk about porous offensive lines. It's not just about having the strong horses there. The best coaches and the good teams consistently get the right pieces to fit the puzzle and get them playing in the right way.
Yeah, it's the good coaches that end up lasting a while. That's the coordinators, the offensive, defensive coordinators that think that the head coaches give it a try and they're out within a year or two. But O'Connell's, there's no surprise or there's no great shocks about how he's performed. And in today's game, I mean, in yesterday's game, the Vikings looked every bit of a championship contender right now. After we spoke in week 1 about my thoughts that the Vikings would be run over by the Giants, 2 weeks is a short time in the NFL. But the Vikings are, I mean, that's a great team from top to bottom. There are no weaknesses. That defense, I mean, I don't know if it's the fact that Mixon was out. I know that was a huge dent in the Texans' armor. But the fact that defense swarmed him and didn't give Stroud any time at all and just made him really uncomfortable back there. That's a testament to Greenard, to Van Ginkel, to Harrison Smith, to Metellus, to Byron Murphy. I mean, there's so many names on defense for the Vikings out there that just showed up. And we haven't even talked about Darnold having a career day of 4 touchdowns. I mean, that was a phenomenal performance on his part. And when you got somebody running the ball like the Vikings have right now, I mean, Aaron Jones, 19 carries, and I think he had a touchdown and 100 yards and change. So that's the difference when you're talking about a team that's top to bottom. And I talked about it last week too. Every week they impress me more and more. The job O'Connell's doing, but it's filtered down to the players. They've kind of filtered the egos out of the building, and they brought in players who are composed and players that want to win, and it shows on the field. I mean, that's top to bottom. I don't see many weaknesses in that team. And again, I'll talk about Darisaw and McNeil, those end tackles who set it all up for the pass game for Darnold. So great performance by Minnesota. They continue to impress.
Brian, it sometimes feels like we're this season, every week is week 1 because maybe that's just that our own picks are being thrown in our faces each week by surprise results. But you look at the Vikings, as Kieran's just been saying, and you know they've taken down the 49ers now and the Texans in consecutive weeks. These are not, you know, middle ranking or low ranking teams that they're taking off here. These are really good teams, really good offenses in particular that Brian Flores is making fools out of. You know, we saw the Vikings ship Danielle Hunter to the Texans. Grenard, as Kieran's just saying there, doesn't look like he was the make weight in that deal. You know, they were happy to pick up Aaron Jones, who was surplus to requirements in Green Bay. Now, it doesn't look like the Packers have done too badly with Josh Jacobs, but they made smart decisions in the offseason. They drafted well. O'Connell seems to be able to get something out of whatever quarterback you throw into the mix. At this stage, it's hard not to see them being contenders. Like, why wouldn't they think themselves in that frame after going 3-0 in this stretch of games?
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly turned things on its head in terms of what we thought would happen within the division. I know it's very early, but we did discuss on myself and Shane were in Buskers on the balls during the week, and we discussed around where the Texans are compared to where the Vikings are and the aspirations and the expectations, albeit one's AFC, one's NFC. But we didn't really see the Vikings at that level now. But this weekend now in particular, it's kind of relevant to why Jordan Love wasn't given an opportunity to play this weekend. I think the Packers are looking at this game this weekend against the Vikings and recognizing this is the big one now. And it's the big one for the Vikings. You touched on the turnover on players, and they're very cute in terms of understanding the right time to move a player on. Dalvin Cook running back, when he was let go, people are going to raise their eyebrows there.
Adam Thielen was another one.
Thielen goes and you bring in Addison in the draft, and it's a younger wide receiver, dynamic wide receiver, similarities to Jefferson. But it all runs through Jefferson. But just to back to Brian Flores, kind of doubling down on what Kieran was saying, I was looking at the numbers over the three games, and maybe with the exception of Daniel Jones, you touched on, like, these are numpty quarterbacks going in. Last week, with Purdy, 1 interception, 2 of Stroud, 2 of Daniel Jones in week 1. They're turning the ball over, which is key. And then what they're doing then, they're obviously taking care of it in terms of making sure they score off the turnovers. It's a huge piece of the game. And for Sam Darnold, like right now, it's a fantastic start. And it's right now, it's probably the storyline of the season for me in terms of how he's turning his career around. And Kevin O'Connell made some really important piece in his press conference. He said, I'm totally in sync with him. It's literally like we're doing the drives together, which is great because bearing in mind, as you said, rightly so, Conor, he brings another quarterback in last season and he seems to, get the best out of him. But right now, he's touching on the fact about how aligned they are. It's a great redemption story for Darnold, and obviously he's come out on the right side of the injury today. It's been confirmed that the damage isn't as severe as they thought. So all things point in the right direction. But what I would say, Conor, is every time we hype a team up on this show, last year, this year, the following week, it goes terribly wrong. And this is a huge game this weekend, albeit it's 4 weeks in.
Yeah, kiss of death coming your way, Vikings. Skull to that one. Another surprise 3-0 team, Kieran, is the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, we thought would hang tough in the AFC North because that's all AFC North teams do. We did not necessarily see them jumping out to 3-0, while the Ravens only managed to pick up their first win of the season over the weekend, and a good win it was too against the Cowboys, in fairness. But, this is a team doing things differently. They don't exactly hit you with the air raid. It's dominant defense. TJ Watt's playing absolutely out of his mind at the moment, like this, on track for one of the best defensive seasons we've ever seen in the league if he keeps going the way he's going. And Justin Fields seems to like playing in that Arthur Smith offense, and they seem to be able to get the most out of what he's able to do at an NFL level, which I can talk for length about as a Bears fan from last season. And we, maybe Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, given what's happening in Vegas, was actually one of the more to blame in that scenario. But it's working well for the Steelers at the moment.
Yeah, and you say differently, but I mean, is there that much different what's going on with the Steelers right now? It's the same recipe since week 1. It's field goals, it's TJ Watt on the outside, it's Najee Harris, and it's Fields protecting the ball, and they're doing just enough. If they're not lighting any scoreboards up, they're not wowing anybody. They're just grounding out the yards. They're bludgeoning teams to death, and they're putting up baseball scores. I mean, that's the first time they got to 20 points this season. Fields had a decent outing, 25-32, a touchdown and a pick, but it's the same recipe. It's that dominant defense. It's TJ Watt, it's Joey Porter. It's just smothering defense. And the other story though as well is with the Chargers. I've been talking about that run game that they have and what they've been doing with that. But the other story is on defense. And Mr. Bosa has gone out injured again. And that might be a bigger storyline as well because he's missed about as many games as he played in the last couple of seasons. And if the Chargers to advance, he's got to be a big part of what they're doing. And Herbert goes out injured too. He's got a right ankle injury. What's the time frame for that? And, these teams are not able to withstand the physicality that the Steelers bring. Everyone knows the Steelers are going to play smash mouth AFC North football, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. They're going to bludgeon you, and that's what they did yesterday. It's a testimony to Tomlin. You know, not many people gave the Steelers much of a shot at the start of the season with that stacked AFC North division that's going on right now, but he's quietly or even loudly going about his business. The only thing, again, like I said last week, they're going to have to start putting points up because they can't just rely on the defense every week. They're going to get spanked around once or twice before the season ends. And 20 points or 18 points ain't going to do it in this league, regardless of the fact that scoring is down. Somebody's going to hang a 30 spot on them pretty soon. So they've got to get that offense humming a little bit more. But, I mean, it's the same as it always was. The song remains the same for the Steelers going into week 4, 3-0 and just rolling.
Shane, maybe they need to change offensive coordinator again. We saw Matt Canada be the scapegoat last season when they weren't lighting the scoreboard up. They're still not lighting it up.
Yeah, but at the same time, when Matt Canada was in situ last year, the two things that the Steelers were missing was a system and a system quarterback. They now have a system and they now have a system quarterback. And I think this game is one where I guess the maturity of that offense is really starting to come through. And it's taken a few preseason games and a couple of low scoring early season games to start to come to fruition. But I really think there is starting to become a lot to like about the way the Pittsburgh are attacking things on the offensive side of the ball. Firstly, Justin Fields is holding on to the ball a little longer. Or isn't holding on to the ball as much. If you remember the way he... I was
just going to say, if he holds on to the ball any longer, Shane, they'll have to prise it out of his hands with the pliers. Yeah, no, sorry. I got it reversed there. He's not holding on to the ball as much because as I'm sure you remember, Connor, like there's a lot of plays here where he kept it in his hands even though he shouldn't have. There was a few plays there where he comes in, and there was one in particular at the end of the second half I thought it really showed the difference between Pittsburgh Justin Fields and Chicago Justin Fields. He came out of the pocket, he moved over to the left. There was room for him to scramble, but he didn't. He looked, he saw Pickens up the left-hand sideline and threw it for about 20 yards. Easy enough, got the job done, smart decision. And the decision making from Justin Fields, I have to say, is improving with every game that we see him play. And then you look at the fact that the Pittsburgh's offense is starting to use a bit more of their offensive weapons. It's not all about Pickens and Freiermuth. Calvin Austin managed to get a few receptions. Obviously, we're contractually bound to do that every time you mention Pat Freiermuth.
And but yeah, like in fairness, as much as Muth got the all of the cheers from Acrisure Stadium, it was Calvin Austin who managed to get that big touchdown in the end. And then, of course, you look at the defense who have conceded.
Which was, by the way, a gorgeous pass, and a pass we did not see Justin Fields make in Chicago, where he trusted his guy and where he actually threaded the needle.
Very much. And the receiver as well ran a really nice route. He kind of came in from the right-hand side, found a gap and managed to manufacture his way into a long run. So, you know, it's those small explosive plays that you need to win in this league. And Pittsburgh managed to pull them out at the right time. And then the defense has given up a grand total of 26 points in 3 games. The Ravens nearly gave up 26 points in the fourth quarter yesterday. So, you know, as much as it's not sexy football, it's football that's getting wins. And you really can't ask for much more from the Steelers. But is it going to collapse at some point? I don't know, because if you look at the opponents the Steelers have to face, you know, I don't really see many typical games. They're playing away to the Colts, at home to the Cowboys, at the Steelers, at home to the 2 New York teams, and at the Commanders between now and Thanksgiving. There isn't a single game there where they can't win. And we're heading to Thanksgiving, they've only maybe got 1 or 2 losses. You know, they're in a pretty good situation coming into the tail end of the year when, in fairness, they do have a much tougher schedule.
And they've got their watch party, of course, coming up in Croke Park in a couple of weeks as well. So they could be still rolling into that one.
You know what happens there, Connor, when there's the watch party in Dublin? They lost last year against the Browns. The 49ers guys know well.
Talk to the Irish faithful, the poor old 49ers guys. Shout out to you. We know you had your watch party over the weekend and you've had some rotten luck with the watch parties. Did not see a collapse in the fourth quarter like that.
Connor, I just wanted to flip it on the Chargers, and not necessarily about the performance, because I felt they held their own for 3.5 quarters, and obviously they Herbert the injury. Right now we don't necessarily know what the longevity of the injury, but bearing in mind he was going into the game with an injury which had him questionable for the game. It was unlikely one stage he was going to play. I thought it was a ludicrous decision to play him. I know it's only week 3 and people say they've got to win these games, but the Chargers have got bigger fish to fry and bigger games ahead. And this weekend they're at home to the Chiefs. And okay, they go in there and they start their backup, and I'm sure there'll be uproar and what's Harbaugh doing, and it's the first scrutiny he'll get immediately as to why he didn't go with his quarterback. And to a certain extent, I understand he's never going to drop Justin Herbert. It's not dropping is not the right word, but saving him for the bigger games. And this weekend now, there's a scenario where he's probably more likely to play this week than he was, going into the game. But yet, should they have made the decision to roll with the backup and then, await next weekend? Because they were going into a game against a team, as you rightly called, aren't blowing teams away with high scoring points. They're efficient in their offense. Justin Fields is playing a lot better, a lot smarter, as Shane has alluded to compared to what we saw in Chicago last year. But it was always going to be a game that was going to come down for me into the fourth quarter, nip and tuck, no matter who was the quarterback for the Chargers. I just felt it was one that he should have been looking a little bit further down the line in terms of what's ahead.
Looking at we talked about Justin Fields, Kieran. I'd be interested in your thoughts on this because you were not all in by any manner or means on Caleb Williams in Chicago. And I remember during the offseason, one of the conversations we had, if you're looking at Chicago and you're looking at Williams, was, okay, what you don't want to happen here is a slow start, which many rookies have, no matter how high you're drafted, a slow start for Caleb Williams in Chicago. And in the meantime, Justin Fields ends up getting the start for Pittsburgh and starts going well because the doubts are going to come to the surface pretty quickly. And saw an article on ESPN this morning. Now, they were suggesting this was an overreaction, but at the same time, it's the first time I've seen this put into print where somebody said, was Chicago wrong to move on from Justin Fields and go for Caleb Williams? It didn't take long for that to start. And I'm just interested in your thoughts because you were quite down on Caleb, and you thought, the cockiness and some aspects of his personality might not play well if things didn't start the season on the right track for him. And it's not looking very, very early to tell. I'm certainly not going to call Caleb Williams a bust. And people will say, well, he passed for 363 yards over the weekend. It's a long time since we saw a quarterback in Chicago do that. But there are signs that it's not going as well as it should.
Well, first off, I'd be wary of ESPN columns on a Monday morning about hot takes and sizzling hot takes and stuff. So I take a lot of ESPN with a grain of salt in that regard. But yes, it's true. I have had many concerns about Williams, not only on the field but off the field. Listen, he's still a rookie. I mean, that was only his third game in the NFL. I've watched him for a long time playing in college, and I've seen the talent. I've seen all the kind of tools in his box, and he's got a tremendous amount of talent. Problem is, he's in a huge city with only one football team. All the eyes are on him. Plus, he's going to be judged, as all rookies are, on offensive production, on balance, on scheme, on perception. So he's got all these eyes on him, and it's impossible for him to tick all the boxes in his first season. Now, he did throw the ball 52 times yesterday, which is a huge amount of times to throw the ball, but still, he did get 2 touchdowns. He also got 2 interceptions. But there are signs for me that he is going to be okay, and he's actually improving. I mean, that was an upgrade on the first week and then last week as well. And you start.
And to be fair to him, having criticized him, they had to throw 52 times because they literally could not run the ball. Like, they end up in an in-goal situation or a goal-to-goal situation. They ran the ball 4 times, 3 power runs, 1 pitch, and they couldn't get a single yard. Yeah. So he has to throw the ball 52 times behind an offensive line that is just waving people through. They're like crossing guards.
Yeah, and that's the bigger issue too. I mean, you got a stalled running game, and you definitely have issues. I mean, that's the thing. He had issues with USC on the line last year, and he's got big issues with the Bears on the line this year, and he's going to probably have to do a lot with his feet as well, on top of throwing the ball 52 times. But you're starting to see little things like the relationship with Odunze yesterday. I know they were probably playing around with who gets the ball first after scoring the touchdown, but it's little things like that you can see the rest of the team are kind of rallying around him. And what I will say is he's very demonstrative. He's the kind of player that if he throws a pick, he will hang his head on the sideline. If he has a bad game, he will get overly emotional. We saw it a lot with USC. There was a clip last year where he was consoled by his mother in the crowd after they lost a game. These are things that will hang over him until he starts displaying that maturity that that players and that fans want in the NFL. I'm not down on Williams right now. I think he's at about where I'd expect him to be. Obviously, the bigger issue with the Bears right now, it's bigger than him. It's the line and it's the run game. And there's some other holes on defense too. But, I don't have many major concerns with Williams right now. Probably have more concerns with Richardson, but we'll, we can go into that a little bit too. I mean, that was probably, I don't want to call it an ugly game because football is the beautiful game, but that was a rough watch at times. I mean, there was that throw into 3 men in the end zone into triple coverage was baffling to say the least. But it's a game that the Colts just about got over the line, just barely in spite of themselves. Nothing too glorious for either quarterbacks on offense. Nothing too great on defense. I mean, Taylor ran the ball for a boatload of times. I think he ran it 23 times for 110 yards, and that's really what ended up getting them over the line. Richardson, I have way more concerns about Richardson than I would have Caleb Williams right now. I think his game has got to develop a huge amount if he's to continue. Some of the times he has the ball running into 3 or 4 defenders, it's frightening. You're like, his knees ain't going to hold up with that. So I've way more concerns about Richardson than Williams right now. But it's the Bears treading water. They'll be okay. So will Williams. Just going to take a while.
Shane, from last year's number 1 overall pick, or this year's number 1 overall pick, to last year's number 1 overall pick, because the Panthers, of course, moved on from Bryce Young, put Andy Dalton in. It turns out that was the answer all along. Just let the red rifle shoot.
Yeah, I don't think anybody saw this coming. Even we were previewing this game, we were like, do we see a future where Andy Dalton can really ignite this offense? And turns out he can. And I think there's questions now coming over as to whether it was Bryce Young all along. Maybe a little bit of an overreaction at this point, especially considering, as I was mentioning when I recorded with Kieran last night, that when Bryce Young got benched, everybody's reaction was, poor Bryce. I hope he gets a better chance somewhere else. And maybe he will. But when Andy Dalton comes in, and it's not even the fact that they won, it's the fact that they came out from the very start and were firing passes that were 10, 20 yards in front of the line of scrimmage and completing them all the time and completing them in the red zone and getting scores. Did the Raiders defense cover themselves in glory? Absolutely not. I mean, this is not the Raiders defense that played against Baltimore a week previous. But this was a real shock.
Antonio Pierce said after the game that they made business decisions, and he's going to make business decisions too, which is ominous.
Yeah, it's just... Yeah, like I was looking at this, I was just having a quick eye in this game, and it's one that, when you're sitting down and suddenly you're like, okay, there's a couple of games I mightn't pay a whole lot of attention to because I feel like it's already a foregone conclusion. And all of a sudden it's the Red Rifles put them 14 to zip up. Does that make the Panthers now a much more difficult team for every week from here on in? I don't know. This could just be a flash in the pan that Andy Dalton was the complete kind of unknown quantity who, despite the fact he already had a very good record against the Raiders, I think he's 3-0 against the Raiders.
I will say, Shane, I think I said this time last week, isn't it amazing now how the NFC South is one of the toughest divisions? The Bucs and the Saints both fall on their asses over the weekend. The freaking Panthers, the team we were laughing about, go and win.
I know, yeah. It does make the matchup in Germany a hell of a lot better now. As we were kind of sitting here after week 2 finishing, thinking, "Oh, geez, this could be 0-9 versus 0-9." All of a sudden, both teams, Giants defense and Panthers offense, has shown signs of life. It certainly makes things interesting for us here in Europe. My big question with the Panthers, though, is now that Andy Dalton has shown the world what he can do, will the rest of the league now take them seriously? I don't think that the Raiders really took the Panthers that seriously. The fact that Max Crosby was the only defender who looked like he was properly doing anything from start to finish shows me that the rest of the defense probably came into this half asleep, not expecting anything from a Panthers team who just threw everything they had at them. But now that they've shown their hand, to use a card game analogy, does that mean that everyone else in the league now knows what Carolina is playing at with this new quarterback? It'll be interesting to see that as we go forward.
Brian, we're going to make a point about Antonio Pierce.
Yeah, I found this kind of staggering in the sense of when he finished the season last year, how everybody was, enjoying the opportunity to play for him, and the players were rallying around with the new GM and the ownership to make sure he got the job. And we saw the relentless cheering when he was taken over after the Josh McDaniels experience, and for him to be coming out after 3 games and saying that about players, essentially packing their bags yesterday and giving up on the game. And now today he's also said that he's considering a quarterback change already. Gardner Minshew is not doing what he expects of him, and he's talking about bringing in O'Connell. And the reason for O'Connell coming in so late wasn't necessarily to give Minshew the rest because the game was gone. It was to try to spark a life in this offense, with the exception of that 4-quarter comeback in Baltimore. Hasn't really done a lot over the course of the 3 games. So it's Kieran called it in the offseason. He didn't think much of the Raiders. He thought there was going to be destruction there. I just wonder, is the Antonio style of Antonio Pierce, like every Giants fan knows what he's like in terms of his commitment, his desire. We saw what he was like when he played for the Giants, Super Bowl winning player. I wonder, is his style of management or style of coaching rubbing off the wrong way on certain players?
Right, we will get to the Giants after this short break. Stay with us on the Irish NFL Show. Well, it's the second segment of our week 3 reaction pods on our reaction podcast on Monday. If you were in Buskers on the Ball on Sunday, you would have seen Malik Neighbours have a game, yet another one for the Giants, Kieran. One of the most incredible catches on a goal line fade you're ever likely to see. Does unbelievably well to get the feet in. Almost didn't look like in real time that he did manage to do it, but this guy is a hell of a player. You were talking at the start of the season about how much you were looking forward to seeing him playing. The Giants haven't played particularly well, but this guy looks like he's on a one-man mission to save both Daniel Jones and Brian Daboll their jobs.
Yeah, 100%. And within 8 seconds of the start of that game, as my remote control flew across and almost hit the dog, that's not where my head was at. But thank
so
God
that remote control was thrown about as well as the average Daniel Jones pass then, because you missed the dog. Was it? You overthrew the dog.
Yes, indeed. Yes. And that's, like every Giants fan, Twitter went into meltdown in about 8 seconds after 1 o'clock yesterday, after 6 p.m. your time yesterday. But thank God for Neighbours. I mean, Daniel Jones has been looking for a best friend for years, since 2019. He's had to go through people like Richie James and, Slayton's still on the field, but he's not a wide receiver one. Malik Neighbours is everything that we thought he was going to be. And all those catches yesterday were just a hallmark of the player that he can be, as long as he keeps his head on his shoulders and doesn't go the way of a former LSU wide receiver. So he's the difference. He's what Daniel Jones has never had. And if Jones can just, I was mentioned to Brian yesterday, if Jones can just clean up all the little things that has caused him problems in the past, play not so much conservatively, but cut down all the errors, keep the picks to a minimum. He was lucky yesterday with the pick, but now he's got an outlet that he can throw up and have a fairly good chance that ball is going to get caught. And with the skill that Neighbours has, there's a better than average chance that catch is going to get made. There's a lot to like about the Giants' performance yesterday. 0-3 would have been just shut it down, total rebuild mode, but they showed something yesterday, especially on defense. Those 8 sacks on Deshaun Watson. He got hit 17 times, which is incredible when you think about it. Same amount of hits that the Cowboys gave him in week 1. And they just swarmed him. And even though the Giants couldn't get anything going in the second half on offense, and that's another story that the Giants will have to figure out this coming weekend or this coming Thursday, the difference is Neighbours. That's something they haven't had all year, last year, the year before that, going back to probably 2014 when they had Odell Beckham in his rookie year. He's the difference. And if they keep him healthy and Jones is able to get to him early and often, there's no reason why Neighbours can't be getting the ball 25 times, if not more a game. Just throw it to him, see what happens. There's other issues going on with the Giants right now on offense. We have a kicker we did have a kicker. I don't know if Joseph is going to make it till Thursday, but these are the things that the Giants are going to have to clean up. But overall, very positive, very hopeful for the Giants. In a much better place than I thought I'd be this time yesterday.
Anytime you see Deshaun Watson get hit 17 times is a good day in my book. In terms of Neighbours, though, Brian, there's a precedent for this. There are other precedents around the league, but it's striking, I suppose, that when you look at Josh Allen's early days in Buffalo, when Brian Daboll was the OC, it was the arrival of Stephon Diggs that transformed the trajectory of his career. He was another big mobile QB, a guy who was occasionally erratic but had undoubted talent. Come on. But you're shaking your head there.
Don't do it, Connor. I know.
Turning Daniel Jones into the new Josh.
Yeah.
This is what Brian Daboll did to transform Josh Allen. He brought in the right receiver at the right time, and it all took off.
I wish that was the case, but I just can't be sold on that, because I had this conversation. We've been having this conversation for 3 years since Daboll came in, that he would have the attributes to turn Daniel Jones around. And I think he's living with the quarterback in which he has right now. And look, I saw something today which I thought was quite quirky. The ball that went up to Malik, the fantastic one. We're talking about the touchdowns, but there was one on the sideline which he went up and he took it over the quarterback's head. Jones was criticised for that throw today, but yet when Jalen Hurts does it last season or the season prior, or Lamar does it, or various other quarterbacks, they're saying, "Oh, what a fantastic play by the quarterback! He knew where to go and get his best wide receiver." Daniel Jones does it yesterday and is criticised for the bad throw. This is the nature of what you want.
I'd say another thing in Daniel Jones' defense as well, Brian, is you kind of reminded me here now, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'll forget otherwise. That fantastic Malik Neighbours catch that we've been talking about only happens because Daniel Jones stands tall in the pocket when Myles Garrett is literally about to take his head off. He gets absolutely rocked after making that throw. That was a really brave throw and a great throw he made.
Yeah, I saw a couple of outlets discuss it this morning. I saw a few mention it, but nobody really got into the devil of the detail. You're right. He stood in the pocket and he got absolutely plowed. And yeah, he found a way to put it in the... For me, if people are suggesting it's a bad throw, he's put it in a position where he knows it's never going to get intercepted. And we've seen time and time again last year against Seattle where he chose an interception, which is returned for a pick six in that particular position of the field in the red zone. He put it in a position yesterday where we're in a situation where we're relieved because, okay, if it's not copying the neighbors, it's not being copied by anybody. Time and time again, the Giants have had some great drives over the course of the last 2-3 years with Daniel Jones on the center, and he chose erratic play balls in the end zone. I thought that one and the Theo Johnson one, probably a little more so than Theo Johnson, I thought was a bit overzealous in terms of the throw, but I think he's learning if he puts it in a position with Malik there, if it's not going to be copied by him, it's not getting copied by anybody. I thought overall Jones played a lot better. He's like, bearing in mind the scrutiny that was under him after the week one, I think over the course of the last 2 weeks. Unfortunately, last week, because of the kicking situation, not to get the win, I thought he played well overall. And even in the second half, despite no scores, I thought he did enough in some of the drives. And some of other players made costly errors, such as fumbles by Singletary. Another one this week that allowed the Browns to hang around. And certainly you didn't think it was on Daniel Jones as to why that happened in the second half yesterday.
Shane, the Eagles win in New Orleans over the weekend as well in Caesars Superdome. And this game was 7-6 at one point going into the fourth quarter. Again, when we were talking about this game in our preview show last week, you were saying, and we were all, nodding our heads vigorously in agreement, how explosive this Saints offense is. Derek Carr averaging 15 yards an attempt. I mean, they barely had 15 yards of passing offense in the entire three quarters until it finally sparked into life. It was an interesting game in the end. Didn't go obviously the way we thought it was going to go, and the win went to the Eagles, and it was a familiar sight doing it with Saquon Barkley again delivering the win for them.
Yeah, a lot of weird takeaways in this one. Firstly, it seems that the Saints in this game in particular, because sort of reverted to type. I don't know whether there was something psychologically about the first two games, about the fact that maybe they were under the radar and that all of their off-season training obviously seemed to pay off, but became probably more readable for a Philadelphia defense, which in fairness to them did a very good job. I mean, Alvin Kamara was held to an average of 3.3 yards per carry over 26 carries. They pretty much shut down the run game. And once that run game was shut down, I don't think Derek Carr, the offense, really had the options to make the passes they were able to make. When we got into the fourth quarter, it was 3-0. But my big takeaway from this game is the fact that my confidence that Nick Sirianni is going to lose his job by the end of the season is growing, and I'll tell you why. In the aftermath of the game, Nick Sirianni didn't say, he didn't, like if you look at, for example, the way Sean McVay came out after the Rams beat the Niners. Yeah, he did the whole holy F, whatever. He was like, proud of my guys, proud of my thing, whatever. There's a level of humility there. Sirianni comes out and starts defending his quarterback. Jalen Hurts is a winner. He's been a winner since he was in high school. He's been a winner. Winner. Like, okay, win more games then, and win more games consistently. Win more games where you're not relying on fourth quarter charges. Win more games where you have better ball security in situations when you've done all the hard work. And the fact that Sirianni sort of felt the need, I think, to defend his position, to defend the position of his quarterback, when there wasn't really pressure on him to do so because he did win the game, there was release of pressure on him internally in the organization to deliver, and I think there's confidence slipping in his own personal ability. So as much as the Eagles won this game, I think they're looking fear shaky for the rest of the season.
It was a very strange game, Kieran, as Shane is saying there, and it's hard to know really, I think, what to make of either team after this one. Maybe the Saints aren't quite who we thought they were, and I'm really not sure who the Eagles are. I mean, we talked about it last week. Still a big believer in the Eagles' talent, but they really do look like they're less than the sum of the parts right now.
Yeah, I heard somebody say yesterday that thank God the Eagles have talent in offense because this coach is not long for this league, especially with the Eagles. Sirianni, I mean, they talk about McCarthy being a lame duck coach in Dallas. I think Sirianni is more of a lame duck coach than McCarthy is right now. That is a team that has very little faith or very little will to play for that coach. It was a really horrible game to watch yesterday on offense. Nothing happening. If I was the Saints fan, I'd be furious because the Eagles were beating all ends up. I mean, Hurts was knocked around the place, sacked 4 times. They couldn't get anything going on offense. Even Smith went out injured with what looks like a concussion. You had a team that was for half of the game without Smith, and you would know AJ Brown either. That was a game for the taking. All they needed was a little bit of poise, a little skill from Derek Carr. And when they needed Derek Carr, what happened? Derek Carr did Derek Carr things and threw a pig to Blankenship with the game on the line. So that's the Derek Carr situation. But the Eagles, again, the 3rd and 16 where Goddard busted up and went on the seam on the left-hand side. Without that, Sirianni would the water in Sirianni's bowl would be super hot right now. I mean, he's dodged a lot of bullets, and like I said, if it wasn't for Goddard and Saquon bailing him out, he would be in more. He would probably more than the Cowboys, which we'll get to later, would be the main topic. But it doesn't. It looks like a team that's listless. Hurts doesn't look himself. I mean, you can say what we want about him and his relationship with Sirianni, but nobody's clicking. It doesn't seem like a fun environment right now. Who knows? Maybe the absence of Kelsey is a really big factor. They lost Lane Johnson yesterday too, so they're limping along. But the only thing is they're still grinding these wins out. And again, from watching that game yesterday, I have no clue how the Saints didn't get the win. Between Kamara and between Olave making that catch towards the end, they're going to be sick today that they didn't get a result out of this. And again, Carr reverted to the mean and threw that pick, and just that's for me more the Saints that we're going to see in the regular season. I think more than what's happened the first 2 weeks.
Brian, you're a big fan of Nick Sirianni's, of course.
Well, I get why the guys are frustrated with him, and I wanted to make a different point on the game around his 4th down play calling. And I know you think I'm opposed to 4th down and going for it, and I probably tongue-in-cheek say he was looking for a spark. But yesterday's game, if ever is a game where we're talking about situational football, yesterday was the one. I thought it was going to come down to a field goal. It looked like that would be the case when the Saints were driving at the end. But he's going for it on 4th down continuously. It's like as if he's reverted to this offensive scheme where it's no matter what the situation is, we're going for it on 4th and 3, 4th and 2, 4th and 1. Sometimes the most strategic and the right thing to do in a game is to punt the ball. His defense was playing very well. I don't think he's actually looking at the game in a manner of going, this is the best approach here. I think he just has some guy talking to him in a headset saying, well, the stats say if you go for it on 4th and 2 in this position, you're going to make on 75%. And he just runs for it because he just doesn't seem to want to punt the ball. And in that situation yesterday, they went for it time and time again. It didn't work, and he still continued to go for it. And Kieran is right. The game was there for Saints yesterday, and they should have taken advantage of it. They didn't. The breakout touchdown from Saquon essentially is to play the game.
You love an old coach who relies on the analytics, don't you? We don't have Brandon Staley to kick around anymore, so now that mantle is being carried by Nick Sirianni.
It just strikes me as a coach that knows he's under pressure and he has to do everything in his power to get wins. And like you could argue, you could flip it around and say if Saquon catches the ball last week, Eagles are 3-0. But in this instance, in this game, the Saints are going to walk away from this game, as Kieran's rightly called out, and say, how are we not 3-0? Because it's one they let get away.
Kieran, Shane mentioned Sean McVay coming out and how pumped he was in the press conference after the game against the 49ers. And speaking of going for it on 4th down, of course, what sparks that whole thing and that whole comeback really, in a way, is the fake punt that the Rams managed to pull off from inside their own half. Like at that stage in the game, McVay is absolutely looking for snookers. He's trying anything to try and spark something, to Brian's point earlier, in a slightly different context. They go down the field. Kyron Williams sensationally finishes off a touchdown run with a somersault over the defender, and it's on. And we end up with a helter-skelter 4th quarter. McVay gets it over Shanahan again.
Yeah, I mean, McVay, that was an incredible coaching job from McVay right across the board. I mean, to all intents and purposes, this game was done with, I mean, that was the Juwan Jennings game yesterday. That looked like it was the headline. 11 catches, 175 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That was his game. He was
Juwan Jennings, just like the time he got 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, he gets overshadowed.
That one out.
Yeah, poor guy has the game of his career, and he gets overshadowed by McVay. But yeah, I mean, like I said, McVay did a hell of a coaching job. I mean, he's basically, it's almost like the replacements. He's pulling guys off the road or off the street, just trying to fill gaps. That's a team that's decimated with injuries, and to get the team galvanized in that regard. I mean, that was that. I mean, that could have been the season yesterday. A loss like that could have shut it down for them. And you're playing in a stadium that was probably 75% 49ers fans. So to all intents and purposes, you're playing a road game. So everything's against you. Your back's against the wall, and he comes out and gets a performance from his team like that. Now, we talked about all the injuries that the Rams have, top to bottom, from Puka to John Johnson to
Like
Boom.
the punt returner who basically, puts them in position to kick the winning field goal. This is his first punt return in the NFL, Xavier Smith. The kicker, I think it's his first game since signing on as a rookie. As you say, it's backups, it's street players, it's practice squad players. Hey kid, you have boots and want a game? Sure, it's crazy.
Yeah, and like I said, everything was against them. You got the 49ers in your building. Granted, they were without their star players, but they still had Jennings. I mean, they still had Mason, who's been a very capable replacement for McCaffrey, and Jennings, who did a great impression of Debo yesterday. So I don't want to credit the 49ers with too much because they were missing, but it's really all about the Rams. I mean, yes, that's another game that the 49ers couldn't impact or even get over the line with a lot of those third downs and stop them on fourth downs too. But it's all about the Rams for me, from McVay to Stafford all the way down. Just rallied everybody. Kyron Williams, they were able to get that win when they shouldn't have got the win. And for a long time, it didn't look like they were going to get the win. But they found something, and to their credit, they muscled out a win. And again, another loss for the Niners. And they can't afford to have many more of these until some of their star players come back.
Shane, we saw the 49ers have a wobble last year where they lost 3 games in a row, having started the season like a runaway train. I wouldn't say they started this season that way. Obviously, they had that big win against the Jets first time out. They've now dropped 2 in a row. Christian McCaffrey obviously gone for an indeterminate period of time, at least 4 weeks. Trent Williams banged up over the weekend. The injuries are starting to accumulate again, and this time they don't have the wins in the bank that they had when they hit that wobble last year. It is a bit worrying for them.
Yeah, what's worrying is defense. I mean, like most of obviously with Christian McCaffrey being out, and I think like a lot of the kind of injuries and the talk about missing talent and the people that the 49ers might rely on in the future being the offensive side of the ball, his defense that isn't playing good enough, and particularly in those situational periods. Offense managed to get over 420 yards of offense yesterday. They didn't make any maybe crucial mistakes. Even if we look at the game against the Vikings, it's defense and allowing Sam Darnold to. I know we've praised his Vikings as being a very capable offensive team, but when you are a Super Bowl contender, as the 49ers are, it's an inch matters. Being able to that little bit of space that you give wide receivers matter, and I'm just not quite sure how the 49ers, in terms of their own mentality defensively, deal with these close situations when they need to get a big play. Because as I mentioned there, I think there was one play where the Rams threw it down the field trying to get the field goal range, and not one but 3 defensive fouls were called in the same play. Complete lack of composure from multiple different players, and we've seen this before. I think one of the main talking points after the Super Bowl was the fact that in that close moments, it didn't seem like the 49ers were fully prepared for when games are really, really tight. Because most of the games last season, as you were mentioning there, Kieran, when they were winning pretty well. Like they stamped their authority on the game early, kept things tight. Now, yes, they did have to mount a big comeback against the Lions in the playoffs. But it's when it comes to these close moments, and I wouldn't mind. It wasn't even close for most of this game against the Rams. The Rams were 14 points down twice. Were 10 points down heading late into the fourth quarter. But as soon as they put the pressure on, the 49ers defense was nowhere to be seen and was making. And it wasn't even that they were giving the space; they were making the silly mistakes, which gave the Rams an avenue back in. So that's really what I'm looking for them to improve on. Luckily for them, though, their next opponents are, of course, the New England Patriots. So I'm sure the defense have a nice little handy training game to get themselves all set up against the 12 yards Jacoby Brissett will throw for on Sunday.
Brian, the Lions got back on track. Shane mentioned them there in the context of that playoff game against the Niners last year. They beat the Cardinals, but this game turned on an extraordinary sequence of plays where ball is snapped apparently just before the 2-minute warning, Jared Goff throws it. It's picked off, run into the end zone for a pick six, which would have got the Cardinals right back in the game. And the refs say, no, it was a 2-minute warning, call the play back as if it never happened. And the Lions get to continue a drive, which they cap with a sensational hook and ladder play. And tip of the cap to Ben Johnson for even trying this. Swing pass to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He runs, engages the defender, and then offloads the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs, who takes it in for the touchdown. This is an offensive coordinator who's very much in his bag and just brings the razzle-dazzle every week. Gorgeous play, great score. That's a 14-point swing, and the Cardinals will really, really rue that one.
Yes, they will, but I did feel over the course of the 4 quarters, it was a game. I thought this game would go down to the very end in terms of maybe a field goal. I thought it'd be a lot more high scoring. I thought the Lions were by and large in control of the game. They didn't play at the greatest offensively, yes, compared to what we've seen recently, but I never thought they were in danger. But I suppose for Cardinals' perspective, they will, obviously have a lot to say about that particular play. We watched it last night. I know we discussed it on the group, and for me, it looked like it was snapped at 2:01. I mean, how many times do we see these days? It's more this season I've noticed than ever, even with the play clock when it comes down to 1 and 0. There's so many plays that we're saying where it literally looks like it's stuck on 0 and the play gets off and there's no kind of delay of game called. That for me yesterday should have been allowed to continue. And obviously, ultimately, it's cost them a big touchdown return defensively. And then, as you said, the double whammy is fantastic drive thereafter, fantastic play. At that stage of the game, I think the Lions probably felt that they were on borrowed time because of what just happened. They said, let's call it a particular play that will, I suppose, catch them off. And it was a fantastic touchdown. Still didn't feel like a game. Look, we know the Cardinals are slowly building to something nice, but it just yesterday they ran into a team yesterday that's just a couple of layers ahead of them in terms of where they want to be in their aspirations.
Shane, if we're on the subject of bad calls, a good call if you're a Chiefs fan, of course, looked like an unbelievably bad defensive pass interference non-call against Kyle Pitts in that game in the early hours of this morning where the Chiefs beat the Falcons, and game could have turned on that one. He has his hands all over him.
Yeah, I mean, you've painted the picture, and for anyone who wants to go look at it, it's reminiscent of a lot of the, I guess a lot of the calls that the Chiefs have, well, at least many perceive anyway, seem to be getting. I mean, if you look at the statistics for their last few wins, they are 9-0 at the moment if you include playoff victories, but they've won by a combined total of just 54 points. And in almost every game, people who are either Chiefs haters or people who are just annoyed them, or people who have probably a very fair point can select some calls, some kind of outrageous calls in some cases, which have gone in their favor. There was even one last week against the Bengals, which I thought was a little bit unfair on Cincinnati, although maybe I was biased because I did pick the Cincinnati to win the Super Bowl. But this is just the nature of a winning team. You look at the Chiefs, every game that they've played, they've managed to win by a score. Everything is tight. They always find themselves on the right side of these matchups. They look a little bit better than they did last season when, it looks like their offense was terrible and just being dragged up the hill by their defense and Patrick Mahomes. But when you're a good team, when you're a dynasty, like we've seen in the past with the Patriots and the Cowboys and the Steelers, you need a little bit of luck. And sometimes luck comes in the form of the way that referees see things. And that's certainly the case with the Chiefs. They'll never beat the allegations that the referees are in their corner until something egregiously goes wrong against them. And when that does happen, they will find a way to build a siege mentality out of it to come back even stronger, as was the case last year against the Bills, which, by the way, was a correct call. And they went mad over that. So if something actually, a big injustice actually does hit the Chiefs, God help us all. That's you need a little bit of luck in this game, as you do in every game, and the Chiefs seem to get quite a lot of it.
That's very true. Even the Dubs had the odd bit of luck on the way to the 6 in a row. Brian, you have a slightly different perspective on the flag.
Yeah,
non-flag as it was.
The non-flag. You're going to need a Roby Cohen type situation with the Rams Saints championship game from that year, which was the most outrageous pass interference we've never seen. It doesn't bother me as much because the Falcons got the ball back again to win the game, and they still found a way to fluff there.
That's good. And what an unbelievable defensive stand from the Chiefs as well. Like
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
that's a Spagnuolo masterpiece there. To
Oh,
just
absolutely. That's where I was
stone them
going.
on
Yeah.
short yardage. Yeah.
That's where I was going with it, Connor, because even if you look at the play, I've looked at it 2 or 3 times today. He put them in a position where he stacked them so much that they just assumed there's no way we're going to get through this wall. So he was luring them into going sideways with a pass. And if you look at throughout the course of the game, every sideways pass or every sideways play, they found ways to stop it. And then you got a linebacker such as Bolton knows exactly what's going to happen here, that they're going to run side route as opposed to running up the gut. And he comes perfectly timing to close them down. It was a masterpiece by Spagnuolo. He's one of the best. We talk about the Chiefs and Andy Reid and Mahomes, but like Spagnuolo over the course of the last 3 or 4 years has done so much for this team, and he did it again last night. And yeah, the flag is disappointing because yet again the Chiefs, people will feel the Chiefs got away with it, but the Falcons had the ball at the end, an opportunity to win the game like they had last week, and they couldn't get it done. And for me, that's really the true reflection of how yet again Spagnuolo outwits an offensive minded head coach in Morris and other various different people on the staff. He's fantastic. He should get another opportunity to be a head coach in the league. I don't necessarily think he wants to do it at this stage. I think he enjoys winning these battles on the defensive side of the ball. It's a stellar win for the Chiefs in a way, because that was one that was there to be had last night for the Falcons.
Finally, Kieran, in Spags, they trust in Kansas City. In Mile High City, should they start trusting the Broncos after they pulled off an unlikely win?
That was probably the most surprising game of the weekend. I mean, nobody saw that coming, even less so than the Panthers, in my opinion. Blazing hot day in Tampa. Bo Nix comes good. Baker inexplicably silent. Nothing happened for the Buccaneers. I was worried about the field because USF had played Miami the night before, and I was glad it didn't rain. Otherwise, that would have turned into a quagmire. But just, that Broncos defense came out with their heads on fire and probably had the opinion or the mindset that, we've got to get a win sooner or later. Let's do it now. But Bo Nix showed up. He did what he had to do. 25 or 36, threw a touchdown. Nothing overly spectacular. Still hasn't thrown a touchdown. Ran in for one. But that's a head scratcher for me with the Buccaneers. At home, everything in their favor. A team that on paper they should have beat, but that's the nature of the NFL right now. Teams that should win are not winning, and vice versa. So, that defense for the Broncos just showed up big, knocking Baker around the field, sacking him 7 times. He could never get in a flow. He never connected with any of his weapons apart from Godwin. I mean, Mike Evans, Rachaad White barely got much going either. And it's a real come down from Tampa after beating Detroit last week and really putting it on the Lions. So hopefully for the Buccaneers fans, that's just a blip in the radar. But good for the Broncos. I mean, that's a really, really good win for them. It's going to make them feel good. And Bo Nix, there's been a lot talked about him over the last couple of weeks, but he can hang his hat on a win now.
He can indeed. 6 teams went into the weekend 0-2. The Broncos one of 5 to register their first win over the weekend. Good for them. We've 2 games tonight, of course. You got Buffalo hosting the Jaguars, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and you got the Commanders playing the Bengals in Cincinnati. Keep an eye on those and check out our preview podcast if you haven't already. We'll be back with you on Thursday with our preview and picks for week 4. But thanks very much in the meantime for joining us on the Irish NFL Show.